The night I met Darren was one of those damp Seattle evenings where the rain doesn't fall in sheets. It drips slow and cold, like it's deciding whether it really wants to soak you or just toy with your patience. I just wrapped a 12-hour shift finalizing a merger proposal and wanted nothing more than a quiet evening on my couch and a bowl of leftover fando. But Marisa, my closest friend from college, had other plans. Her husband's birthday party was in full swing, and she wasn't taking no for an answer. "You work too much, Camila," she'd said over the phone, her voice laced with that stubborn warmth only a lifelong friend could get away with. "Just show up for an hour. You owe me that much, you still haven't used your bridesmaid dress." So I went fully expecting to count down the minutes until I could slip away unnoticed. Instead, I met him. Darren wasn't the kind of man who demanded a room's attention. He didn't have the boisterous laugh or the flashy charisma that made other men magnetic at parties. No, his presence was quieter, like a well-worn book on a crowded shelf. You had to be looking to really notice him. But when I did, I couldn't look away. He approached me with a half-smile and said, "You're Camila, right? Marisa said I'd find you hovering near the food table, trying to look invisible." It made me laugh, really laugh for the first time in weeks. He worked in human resources consulting, said he liked helping people navigate their careers without losing their sense of self. It struck a chord with me, though I didn't say so. We talked about the rain, our mutual hatred for small talk, and the weird comfort of old jazz records. It was easy, which was rare for me. My life didn't leave much room for ease. I'd spent my 20s clawing my way up the ladder in the tech industry. Long hours, endless strategy meetings, and pressure that never let up. I was the youngest senior manager in my firm, and I wore that title like armor. Men didn't intimidate me, but relationships did. They always ended the same way, resentment disguised as jokes or long silences that said you're too much without ever needing words. But Darren didn't flinch when I told him what I did. He didn't ask me to tone it down or pretend to be impressed. He just listened. And when he looked at me, it wasn't through a lens of competition or expectation. It was as if he saw all of me and still stayed. Our romance unfolded quickly but never felt rushed. Morning texts became long conversations, dinners turned into weekends, and soon I found myself rearranging my world to include him. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. When he told me, "I don't care how successful you are, I just want to be someone you can come home to," I believed him. We married a year later in a modest garden ceremony just outside Redmond. The air smelled like lavender and wet earth, and I remember thinking it was the beginning of something real. Darren's parents, Eloise and Mark, wrapped me in hugs and gifted me a hand-woven scarf for all those long days in a cold office. They called me family, praised my work ethic, and looked at Darren like he'd won the lottery. I didn't see it then the way Darren hesitated whenever money came up, or how Eloise's compliments about me always circled back to how responsible or generous I seemed. It felt like affection, and maybe it was. Or maybe it was admiration laced with calculation. But I wasn't looking for signs. I was too caught up in building a life I'd spent years thinking I didn't deserve love, partnership, family, and Darren. He seemed like the one man who didn't need to be carried or convinced. For a while I thought I'd finally gotten it right. But sometimes the storm doesn't announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it begins with a gentle drizzle, the kind that slowly soaks you until you don't even realize how cold you've become. The first time Darren mentioned the idea, we were folding laundry together on a lazy Sunday morning. The windows were cracked open to let in the crisp fall air, and our golden retriever Milo snored softly on the rug. I was thinking he started casually, like we were discussing weekend brunch. "My parents' place has a ton of space. What if we helped them convert it into a duplex? That way we could live closer, help out as they get older." I paused mid-fold. "You mean live with them?" "Not exactly. It'd be two separate spaces. Separate entrances, kitchens, everything. Just connected by a hallway. They're not getting younger, Cam. My dad's back is shot and Mom's memory's been slipping. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, pretending to think about it. But I already knew what this meant. Change, compromise, another layer of responsibility. Still, Darren looked so hopeful, so gentle in his plea. He didn't push. He just let the silence hang. A week later, after a long dinner at his parents' house, where Eloise made her famous pot roast and Mark shared an old photo album, I said yes. It felt like the right thing to do. From that point on, I was swept into a whirlwind of plans, permits, design consultations, contractor meetings. Darren had already talked to a construction buddy who gave him a quote just under $100,000. It's a steal, he said. We're lucky to know people. At first, I was involved in every step: tile samples, floor plans, paint colors. Darren seemed enthusiastic too, constantly texting me links to furniture sets and garden layouts. It felt like a project we were doing together. But slowly his attention drifted. He started missing meetings. I'd ask about invoices and timelines, and he'd say things like, "Don't worry, I got it," or "It's under control." But when I followed up, he rarely had specifics. I began noticing I was the one signing checks, sending wires, fronting every payment. And when I asked gently if his parents were contributing anything, Darren would smile like I'd just told a joke. They're not in a position to help much right now, he said. But it's temporary. We'll figure it out. I didn't argue. I was making good money. I could afford it. And more than anything, I wanted to believe this was a gesture of love, not obligation. But the cracks kept widening. One night, I sat on the couch reviewing our budget spreadsheet. The numbers stared back at me like an accusation. We'd already spent close to $60,000, and the foundation hadn't even been poured. I turned to Darren. Hey, babe, can we go over the costs? I just want to be sure we're tracking everything. He shifted in his seat, eyes still on the TV. Why you think something's wrong? No, we should both know where we stand, right? He muted the screen, finally looking at me. Cam, I trust you. You're good at this stuff. Honestly, I just mess it up. It was meant to flatter, I think. But it landed wrong. Trust wasn't the issue. Partnership was. And for the first time, I felt alone in something that was supposed to be ours. Still, I didn't stop. I told myself he was just overwhelmed, that this was just a phase. I covered the next payment, $15,000 for plumbing installation, and then another $8,700 for roofing deposits. The receipts stacked up like quiet reminders of promises I wasn't sure were mine or his. Eloise continued to fawn over me. You're such a blessing to this family, she'd say, squeezing my hands. Mark joked that I should have been a financial planner. Darren would laugh, ruffle my hair, and whisper, "You're my rock." But somewhere deep down, something shifted. A sliver of doubt lodged where trust used to live, and I didn't know it then, but that house, our so-called duplex, wasn't just bricks and lumber. It was a monument built on uneven ground, and I was the only one laying the foundation. It was late, almost midnight, when Darren finally told me the truth. I had just returned from a week-long conference in San Francisco, suitcase, still by the door, heels kicked off in exhaustion. The renovation was finally underway. Framing was done, drywall scheduled for the following week, and I thought just maybe we were reaching the turning point. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring at his hands like they were foreign objects. "Camila," he said quietly, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you. That's never how good conversations start." I eased onto the armchair across from him, still holding a half-eaten protein bar. "What is it?" He looked up, face pale. "My parents. They're in debt. A lot more than I originally thought." My stomach turned, but I kept my voice even. "How much are we talking?" He hesitated. "About $140,000. The words landed like a slap. I blinked. Wait, what? Darren ran a hand through his hair. It started years ago. My dad invested in a restaurant franchise. It tanked. Then they took out a loan to cover that. It snowballed. They've been rolling it over ever since. And you're just now telling me this. I didn't want to stress you out, he said too quickly. I thought I could handle it. I've been trying to figure out a way to help them without dragging you into it. But I'm already in it, Darren. I've paid nearly 70 grand toward this renovation. I'm the only one funding it. He flinched. I know. I'm sorry. But now the debt collectors are circling, and if they default, they could lose the house. That includes the duplex you've put so much into. That last line, it was meant to sound like a shared problem, but it felt like a trap. I stood up, trying to think clearly, trying not to cry. So what exactly are you asking me to do? He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes like a dying flame. Help them, just for now. You're the only one who can. I should have said no. I should have screamed, walked out, demanded answers. But instead I sat back down. My heart was pounding, my head swimming, but I still loved him, or at least the version of him I thought was real. The man who listened to jazz, who laughed at my terrible puns, who once said he'd take care of me, even if I never needed taking care of. And so I said yes. The next morning, I wired $70,000 from my savings to settle the most urgent debts. I insisted on receipts, documentation, transfer confirmations. It made me feel marginally in control, like I wasn't just throwing my life savings into a black hole. Eloise called me crying, her voice shaking with gratitude. "Camila, you saved our family," she sobbed. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Mark sent a thank you email written in awkward but sincere phrases, calling me the strongest woman we've ever known. Darren kissed my forehead and whispered, "You have no idea how much this means to me." But I was beginning to have an idea. With each passing week, the numbers haunted me. I tallied every dollar spent, construction costs, design fees, and now family debts. The total crossed $110,000, and Darren still hadn't contributed a cent. Each time I asked, there was a delay, a missing invoice, a vague excuse about a late client payment. "Just hang on a bit longer," he'd say. "We're almost there." And still I waited. Still I believed. But beneath that belief, something darker was brewing, a whisper that said this wasn't about family, it was about convenience. And maybe, just maybe, I was the one being used. The illusion of love and partnership held strong on the surface. We still had dinners. He still held my hand in public. But in the quiet corners of our shared life, I felt it unraveling, like paint cracking beneath the surface, like a debt too deep to ever fully repay. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of quiet, overcast day that usually meant slow music soup on the stove, and Darren sprawled across the couch pretending to read while I organized bills at the dining table. I had just come home early from a last-minute strategy meeting that got canceled. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and paint, two conflicting scents that had oddly come to define my life since the renovation began. I walked in through the side door, carefully balancing a paper bag of almond croissants. I didn't call out, just assumed they were all out or maybe napping. But before I even turned the corner, I heard them. Laughter, low and careless. "Camila really is something, huh?" That was Mark's voice, deep and always a little smug. "She writes checks like it's a hobby. All that tech money and not a drop of suspicion. She's too proud to ask questions," Eloise chimed in, chuckling. "Just nod and look grateful. That's all it takes." I froze in place. My breath hitched, but my feet wouldn't move. Then Darren's voice, clear, casual, too relaxed. "Yeah, but we gotta wrap this up soon. Once the house is done, she'll start asking more questions. She's already tracking stuff." "She's useful for now," Eloise said. "But once it's paid off well, she'll understand if things don't work out." Mark laughed. "She's smart, but not smart enough to see what's in front of her." I don't know how long I stood there. The bag in my hand began to crumple. My pulse was loud in my ears, drowning out the rest of the conversation. I backed away, slow and silent, and slipped out the door before they even knew I was home. In the car, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there in my driveway, watching rain trail down the windshield, my breath fogging the glass. That's when I knew. I was not a partner in Darren's life. I was an asset. They had planned this, used me, my money, my time, my trust, and I had walked right into it wide-eyed and eager to belong. But I wasn't broken, not yet. That night I sent Darren a text saying I had booked a hotel downtown to meet with a potential investor. International client late meeting, I wrote. He replied instantly, "No problem, babe. Stay safe. Love you." I stared at the screen, rereading the lie I'd just received. Love, that wasn't love. That was manipulation packaged in sweet words. And I had swallowed it for months, but I wasn't going to let it continue. Starting that week, I created a private folder on my laptop, Project North, named after the direction I planned to head in away. I began collecting every financial receipt, bank transfer, and invoice. Every wire I'd sent to cover their renovation, every documented payment toward their debt, even the messages Darren had sent asking for just one more favor. I added audio memos, dates, screenshots. I tracked it all. I also reached out to a financial attorney, a woman named Jasmine, who came highly recommended for quiet, discreet exits from toxic financial entanglements. "You're not the first," she said, flipping through my documents, "and you won't be the last. But you might be one of the few who walks out ahead." I said nothing, just nodded. At home, I played my role to perfection, smiled over dinner, kissed Darren goodnight, chatted with Eloise when she dropped off homemade soup. Every time she said, "You're our angel," I returned her smile with one just as sweet. Only now mine was layered with quiet fury. They thought they had fooled me, that I'd keep playing along. But the mask they wore, the one they thought was so convincing, had slipped. And I was done pretending. The next chapter of this story wouldn't be built on blind love or wishful thinking. It would be built on strategy, silence, and the kind of strength they never saw coming. From the outside, nothing changed. Darren still kissed my cheek every morning before heading to his supposed client calls. Eloise still brought over her over-salted casseroles every Thursday. Mark still joked that I'd be running the whole city one day. I still smiled, nodded, even laughed on cue. But inside I was already gone. I had learned something in business that now served me well in life. When you know you're being played, never show your hand until the deal is done. So I became the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, the model investor. And in the quiet hours behind locked doors and firewalled emails, I began reshaping my exit. The first step was the house. I knew Darren wasn't keeping track of the legal documents. Every time we signed a permit, he half read the pages before scribbling his name. So when I suggested we simplify our property holdings for tax reasons, just temporarily moving ownership to me until the renovation's officially approved, I said he didn't hesitate. "Sure," he replied, munching on toast, "whatever works best. You know this stuff better than I do." The documents were real. The transfer was clean. Within a week, the entire property title, land and all, was in my name. A single signature sealed it. Mine. Next came the debt. I contacted the bank that held the majority of Mark and Eloise's outstanding loans. I offered to pay off the remainder, about $28,000, under one condition: the debt be legally reassigned to me. The banker, thrilled to close such a mess, agreed without question. One signed release, one paid check, and the paperwork was mine. From that moment on, I was no longer just the woman paying the bills. I was their creditor. The irony wasn't lost on me. At home, I played the same old part. I cooked, I cleaned, I asked Darren about his day. We watched our favorite shows while I mentally logged every lie he told me. He even bought me flowers, once cheap lilies from a gas station, and said, "I know I've been distracted lately. Just want you to know I appreciate everything." I thanked him, kissed him on the cheek, and filed that moment into memory. It would be useful later. With each passing day, I built my case. Jasmine, my attorney, helped me compile evidence, bank statements, recordings, text messages, even the voice memo I'd saved from the day I overheard their betrayal. "You're doing well," she told me after one of our quiet meetings. "Most people would have cracked by now." "I already did," I replied. But I rebuilt myself stronger. By the 3rd month of my plan, the pieces were almost all in place. The only thing left was the divorce. We filed quietly through Jasmine's office. No warning, no discussion. Darren had no idea. I scheduled it for a Thursday morning while he was out visiting a vendor. That same morning, Jasmine submitted a full legal package, the divorce filing notice of debt reassignment, and a preemptive claim to full property rights. Everything he thought he controlled was no longer his. That night I cooked lasagna, his favorite, set the table, lit candles. I even poured wine and toasted the nearly completed renovation. Darren clinked his glass with mine and said, "You know, Camila, I really think we're getting back to where we started. Stronger, even." I smiled at him over the rim of my glass. "Oh, we're getting somewhere. You have no idea." He leaned in to kiss me, but I pulled away just slightly, just enough to make him notice. What he asked. Nothing I said, brushing hair from his forehead. "I just don't want to forget this night." And I wouldn't. Because tomorrow morning, when the papers hit his inbox and the reality of everything he'd lost came crashing in, I wanted him to remember tonight. The warmth, the comfort, the illusion he believed in. Because that right there was my final performance. And the curtain was about to fall. It was early quiet still. The kind of morning where even the birds seem to pause, like they know something's about to change. I woke up before dawn, the house cloaked in shadow. Darren was still asleep, curled on his side, one arm flung across my pillow. I watched him for a moment, not out of affection, but as a reminder. This was the man who sat across from me night after night, telling me we were partners while laughing behind my back with his parents about how easily I could be fooled. I got up without a sound. On the kitchen counter, I laid everything out with surgical precision. The divorce filing neatly signed and time-stamped. The debt reassignment notice confirming I now legally held his parents' outstanding loans. A copy of the home title listing me, and only me, as the sole owner. And finally, a handwritten note. "Good luck negotiating with your new lender. I don't plan on being generous." I didn't linger. My suitcase was already packed and in the trunk. The condo I'd purchased downtown, just blocks from the waterfront, was waiting its keys in my purse. I closed the deal in secret weeks earlier using a separate LLC tied to my investment firm. Clean, private, untouchable. By the time Darren shuffled into the kitchen to brew his morning coffee, I was halfway across the city, gliding through empty streets, with the sunrise breaking over the bay. The silence felt different this time. It wasn't heavy. It didn't weigh on my chest like it used to. It was clear, sharp like fresh air, after months of breathing smoke. The condo was small, bright, modern, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every tile, every window, every beam of light that hit the floor belonged to me and me alone. I dropped my bag, slipped off my shoes, and walked barefoot to the balcony. From there, I could see the water stretch all the way out past the docks, the city waking slowly beneath a sky streaked in orange and gold. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't someone's investment. I wasn't a financial plan or a convenient safety net. I was just Camila fully freely. My phone buzzed. 5 missed calls, all from Darren. I didn't answer. Then came the texts, one after another. "We need to talk. I didn't know you were this upset. Why would you do this now? Cam, please." Then finally, "Are you really walking away?" I stared at that last message and for a second let myself remember everything. Our first dance in that tiny garden under the rain, his late-night back rubs when I worked too long. The inside jokes we once had about how we'd grow old arguing over soup recipes. But love without respect isn't love. It's control. And I wasn't going to be controlled anymore. I replied with a single line. All communication should go through my attorney. Then I blocked his number. Later that afternoon, Jasmine confirmed the documents had been delivered. Darren had no legal claim to the house. His parents now owed me over $60,000 in personal debt. And the divorce filing was airtight, backed by months of evidence. He could stall, he could scream, he could beg. None of it would change the fact that every move he made had led to this moment. The woman they underestimated, the one they mocked and manipulated, had become the one holding all the cards. And I wasn't playing games anymore. I poured a glass of wine, stood by the window, and watched as the sun dipped lower, turning the bay to liquid fire. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. And it tasted like freedom. I hadn't been gone a full week before the final mask slipped. It was a Saturday morning, and I was prepping for an investment seminar when my phone rang. It was Mr. Santiago, the property manager I'd retained after transferring the Lakeview property into my name. His voice was sharp, urgent. "Camila, I hate to bother you," he began, "but there's been an issue at the house. Someone changed the locks. They claimed you no longer own the property." I stopped cold. "Who?" He hesitated. "A woman, blonde, said she's Darren's girlfriend." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. My silence said everything. I drove straight to the house, no hesitation. The gate had a new chain on it, and the lock glinted in the morning sun, still slick with oil, like it had been installed just hours before. But I wasn't worried. I still had the original keys. And more importantly, I had the title deed and a civil attorney who didn't play games. I rang the doorbell once. Darren opened it, wearing the white linen shirt I had bought him 2 birthdays ago. His face flickered between smugness and surprise. "Cam," he said smoothly, as if we were old friends running into each other at brunch. "Didn't expect you to drop by." "Clearly," I said, stepping inside before he could block me. The house smelled different now, not of renovations or soup or new beginnings, but perfume, cheap, fruity, overbearing. She appeared from the hallway with a glass of orange juice, her movements casual, her smirk practiced. "This her?" she asked. Darren nodded. "My ex." I turned to him. "You changed the locks. I figured you wouldn't be needing access anymore." "You moved out." "New life, right?" he said, spreading his arms like a host welcoming a guest. I didn't respond. "You left this place empty. I just reorganized things," he added, smugness crawling back into his voice. "My parents still think you can stay here if you agree to a few conditions." I tilted my head. "Conditions?" "Yeah," he said. "Pay rent, handle housework. You know, since there's more of us now, we'd appreciate the help." I blinked. Then I laughed, really laughed loud and without restraint. Darren took a half step back, clearly thrown off. "You want me," I said slowly, "to pay rent and do chores in a house that's legally mine." He shrugged. "Well, technically you left." So I cut him off by pulling my phone from my pocket. "Hi, Jasmine," I said when the line connected. "Get ready to file for trespassing, unlawful occupancy, and violation of property ownership." "Yes, the entire household, effective immediately." Darren's face turned pale. The girlfriend's smirk vanished. "You can't do that," he stammered. "Camila, come on, we were married." "Doesn't that count for something?" where I said sharply. "You ended that. And as for what counts my name on the deed, the debt papers, the court filing, that counts." I turned toward the door, every step lighter than the last. "You have 3 hours," I said without looking back. "Pack up, get out, and take your new furniture tester with you. If you're still here by lunch, the police will be." He didn't follow me, not this time. The rain had started again as I reached my car, but I didn't care. I let it fall on my face, soaking my blazer, my hair. It felt like a baptism, one last cleansing before I shut the door on that chapter for good. And it wasn't revenge I carried with me that day. It was justice, quiet, cold, and surgically precise. The kind you don't need to announce because the truth speaks loud enough when it finally walks through the front door. The eviction notice went out the next morning. By the time Darren and his entourage scrambled to find a lawyer, my legal team had already filed trespass charges and a demand letter that left no room for interpretation, vacate immediately, or face a civil suit. Within 48 hours, the locks were changed back. My property manager posted the official ownership documents on the gate, just in case they were tempted to return. They didn't. 3 days later, Jasmine filed a civil compensation claim for $75,000 against Darren and his new partner for financial damages, emotional distress, and violation of marital ethics. In Washington, betrayal may not be criminal, but it sure isn't free. She also filed for alimony based on Darren's prolonged financial dependence on me during our marriage. We had receipts, we had contracts, we had a handwritten IOU with his signature. They had nothing but arrogance. Eloise and Mark tried the pity act, calling me in tears, begging me not to destroy their family. I didn't yell. I didn't respond with cruelty. I simply said, "You destroyed your own family the day you thought I was too polite to fight back." They fell silent, maybe for the first time in their lives. Eventually, the courts ruled in my favor. Darren was ordered to pay $35,000 in spousal compensation over 12 months. The girlfriend settled out of court, wiring a lump sum to avoid having her name appear in public records. Eloise and Mark repaid the remaining $60,000 they owed me every cent, just to avoid a full-blown trial. But it wasn't the money that healed me. It was the closure. The Lakeview house, my former battleground, was sold within a month. A young couple bought it, enchanted by the dual living design and custom kitchen I had poured my heart into. After clearing all associated costs, I walked away with a net profit of just over $40,000. Not life-changing, but more than enough to mark a fresh start. With Jasmine's encouragement, I enrolled in a wealth management course and hired an independent advisor. I started treating my finances not just as protection, but as power. I learned to track the market, invest wisely, and plan long-term on my terms. The penthouse I now called home overlooked the harbor. Every evening I'd step onto my balcony and watch the ferries glide through the bay like silent witnesses to a world constantly moving forward. And I was moving too. I didn't date. Not right away. I didn't need the distraction. I needed time to remember who I was before I became a transaction in someone else's story. When I finally allowed myself to feel again, truly, feel, it wasn't love I chased. It was peace, purpose, possibility. The kind that grows when you finally realize you don't need to be chosen to be worthy. I reconnected with my parents. My mother, once skeptical of my marriage, now visited often. She didn't say "I told you so." She didn't have to. She'd sit on my couch, sip tea, and just look at me with the kind of pride only mothers can express without words. My father, a man of few opinions, offered the only validation I ever needed. "You did good, kid," he said, patting my shoulder. "Real good." I smiled, and I meant it, because I wasn't the woman who'd walked into that party years ago, starved for affection, and ready to believe in anything soft and easy. I was Camila. I had paid the price, learned the lesson, and rewritten the rules. I no longer kept people close out of fear they might leave. I kept them close if they proved they deserved to stay. And if you asked me now whether I regretted loving Darren, I'd say no. He was the fire that scorched everything I thought I knew about love. But in the ashes I built something stronger, something mine. Freedom has a name, and for me it's Camila, unbent, unbroken, and finally free.